Good morning. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020. Welcome to Coffee with a Farmer or Resource Manager. My name is Katie Wortman, the Central Valley Farms Coordinator, coming to you from Fresno. Today we have Trinchero Family Estates GIS Database Administrator for wine grapes joining us. Please welcome Douglas Wood. Douglas, we'll get to you in just a minute so you can introduce yourself. But first, today's Earth Day. So how do you in your family practice or celebrate Earth Day, as agriculture is Earth Day every day? So I use a lot of reusable cups and straws and bags whenever possible. And so that's kind of how we're getting started this morning. We're going to go through the farms coordinators. Start off with Tehama Farms Coordinator, Dana Baker.
Good morning, everybody. Well, in kind of celebration of Earth Day, I decided to come with you outside and enjoy. It's beautiful up here in Red Bluff today. I think it's probably already almost 70 degrees. I think we're expecting a high of 85 or something. And kind of to touch on that, I mean, Earth Day means that my family, we are very involved in agriculture. We raise meat goats and beef cattle, and we also have a small walnut orchard, which currently we are in the process of reestablishing. So we've pulled out our trees, and now we're in the process of prepping the soil. So the kids and I, to really celebrate the day, we're gonna actually get our garden seeds in the ground. We had anticipated starting them in pots in the house, and time has ticked by, and now it's just time to put them in the ground. So we're gonna do that this afternoon once everybody's done with their schoolwork. So.
Good morning all, my name is Joseph Montoya. I'm the Farms Leadership Coordinator for Sacramento Valley. The way that I celebrate Earth Day, much like Katie, is with a lot of reusables. I have a whole bunch of stainless steel straws that I like. One word of advice, make sure that if you buy stainless steel straws, that they be the food safe ones. I had a bad situation with one, but I bought some stainless steel ones that are food something, and they work fantastic. Another thing is my handy coffee cup, ceramic. Looks like, I bought it this morning, but no, I brought it from home. Another thing, I actually do a little bit of gardening in the backyard. So jalapenos, tomatoes, and eggplant, all my go-tos. That's it. That's how I celebrate my Earth Day.
Good morning. My name's Romi Wattenbarger. I'm the Kern County Farms Coordinator here in Bakersfield. And I would say mine is along the lines of Dana. We run about 300 head of goats. We have cattle, and we harvest our own alfalfa. So I'd say we go out in the fields. We check hay every day and before we harvest it. And we actually started planting tomatoes yesterday, and we use our own manure, the cow manure. We'll just go in there, shovel it, and go for it. So I would say that would be along the lines of that. So.
Great. Hi, I'm Leticia Hernandez, and I run the program in Monterey and Santa Cruz counties. For Earth Day, it's kind of a big deal. It's been a big deal for the last 10 years for my family. And this year's the 50th Earth Day ever, so it's a really big worldwide. What I'm gonna do this year, I just bought some new planter beds that we assembled yesterday, so we're gonna get those set up. And then I also would like to start on a compost. So I'm gonna go pick up some worms, and we're gonna start doing a vermicomposting to take care of our food scraps. So now we can go ahead and transition and introduce Doug Wood, who we have here speaking in regards to GIS. Doug works with, can you say it again, Doug?
Trinchero
Vineyards, and he is the GIS Database Administrator for wine grapes. So Doug, can you go ahead and share a little bit about what that means?
Sure. So hi everyone, I'm Doug Wood, and I am the GIS Database Administrator with Trinchero Family Estates. We are a fairly large winery. We're the 4th largest winery in the United States and the 2nd largest family-owned winery in the United States. We produce, I think the annual production is like 28 million cases of wine per year, which is about 1 bottle of wine for every person in the United States. And a large number of our wine grapes are actually sourced from external growers. So we buy our grapes on the market, or we have contracts with growers throughout the state. But a substantial portion of our wine grapes come from our own vineyards that we own and manage throughout. We farm in 10 different counties throughout California, and we farm about 10,000 acres. And I work within the vineyard department at Trinchero Family Estates, and I was hired to essentially bring the vineyard department and their data management and collection systems into the 21st century. And so part of that is mapping all of the vineyards that we farm throughout the state, and then essentially being a data architect for collection of viticultural data throughout the season, and then also being able to track the productivity of given blocks, vineyard blocks, and then also using GIS as a tool to aid in the development and redevelopment of our vineyard blocks and ranches.
Great. And what does GIS stand for? It's excuse me, that was my dog.
That's all right.
Geographic information.
Geographic information systems, yes. And it's essentially a computer, forgive me. It's essentially a computer software that can be used for the analysis and management of geographic data, but then also cartographic production, so the making of maps.
Great. How can you explain how you got into this? What was your career pathway? Did you know you wanted to do this when you were in high school?
No, not at all. It's kind of funny, actually. So I'm originally from San Francisco, but I grew up in Sonoma, which is where I live now. And when I was, my first job actually was working on a vineyard when I was about 13 years old, suckering rootstock, which is back-breaking work, and I hated it. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to do anything related to this again. Many years later, after I finished an undergrad degree in cultural anthropology, which is not the most economically fruitful degree to obtain, I heard about GIS through my mom, actually. There was someone doing GIS here in Sonoma and using GIS to manage data that pertains to the Sonoma Valley watershed. So everything from soil types to erosion control measures. Basically, this gentleman was using GIS to help manage all the environmental data for Sonoma Valley. And I'd always been a map geek. I've always loved geography. And I thought, well, that sounds like something interesting. My father was a gardener in Golden Gate Park, and I'd always enjoyed being outside. And I thought, oh, this is the kind of work that might allow me to both work outside, but inside as well. And so I started volunteering at this, the Sonoma Ecology Center, which is this local nonprofit that was using GIS in this way. And one thing led to another. I ended up doing an internship with the U.S. Forest Service, and I did another internship with the transportation consulting firm in San Francisco. And I worked as a waiter, which sort of got me thinking about wine. A lot of the people that I worked with were not from a wine producing area. And for them, wine was just a commodity, you know, it's just something that comes in a bottle. And for me, again, given my upbringing, for me, wine is inherently an agricultural product. Mm-hmm. And so I was working as a waiter and doing GIS internships in San Francisco. And then eventually I worked for a satellite imagery company. I worked for an engineering firm. And then the mother of my children, she was expecting, and I heard about an opportunity in Sonoma to work with the guy that had originally taught me GIS. And he had started a firm doing GIS and GPS consulting within the wine industry. And so he needed someone to help him run his business. And I jumped at that opportunity. I worked for him for about 6 years. And then I decided for some silly reason to go back to grad school and get a master's degree in geography in Oregon. And then moved back to Sonoma, and through connections that I had in the wine industry, I worked doing viticultural consulting, and I worked at a winery for a little while. And then I was recruited to do GIS for a vineyard and winery down in Monterey County called Scheid Vineyards in Greenfield, King City area. And I went and worked for them for about 2.5 years, helping them, again, use GIS to map and manage all their vineyard block information, but then also to develop mobile applications for navigating and collecting data. And so I was there for about 2.5 years, and then I ran into someone that I knew from Napa, and a gentleman that works for a vineyard management company called Pina Vineyard Management, and they recruited me, and I moved back up to the North Bay. I worked there for about 2.5 years, and then most recently in July, I accepted a position as a GIS Database Administrator for Trinchero Family Estates, which really, I didn't intend on this career path, but I kind of had a dream of doing what I'm doing now about 10, 12 years ago. And so it's been a circuitous route, and hasn't always been as fruitful as I'd hoped, but I'm very blessed and privileged to have the job that I have now, which is, like I said, my dream job. So.
Great. Sounds like you really got around the state with GIS. I wanted to maybe ask more about when you talk about collecting data for the blocks, what does that mean, and what kind of data are you creating maps for? I know you mentioned stuff about soil chemistry, and if you can talk a little bit more about that. Yeah,
so the main project that I'm working on right now is a mobile application that's GIS based, and I wish I could show you on my phone, but I don't want to bore you by making you look at a small little screen. But essentially, I have taken all of our vineyard blocks throughout the state and mapped them, and then published that data to the internet. And then I'm able to access that data on my phone through an application that I built that allows for a user to navigate. So for example, if you're in the middle of a really large vineyard and you don't know what year it was planted or how many acres it is or what the variety or clone or rootstock is, all that information is available at your fingertips. And the app will basically geolocate you. It'll tell you where you are, much like when you use Google Maps on your phone. But it's using proprietary information that I've developed. And then I've taken that application and I'm using that as sort of a a base layer for the collection of data. And so right now, the big thing that I'm working on is a yield projection app. So as anyone working in agriculture will tell you, crop estimation is a huge part of what we do. And for us, it's really critical because you get one shot in our industry. It's not like row crops where there's, you know, we're growing one thing, and come harvest time, you know, when La Cosecha comes, like that's what we're doing. That's all we're doing for 3 months, and that's when we make all our money. And so being able to adequately estimate the tonnage coming from a given vineyard block has huge implications for all sectors of our business. Everything from how many crews we need, how many people we need, how many trucks. You know, it's not uncommon for us to, during a night pick, to send 96 tractor trailers full of grapes to the winery. So being able to plan logistically for that element, just from a farming and transportation perspective, is critical. But it's also really critical to tell the winery how many tons they're going to get so that they have adequate tank space within the winery to accommodate those grapes. Because if you don't put those grapes in the tank, they'll rot, and then there goes your profit. That also has implications for our winemaking team. You know, we have probably 24 winemakers throughout the state working in various capacities. It also has huge implications for finance and accounting, budgeting. And so basically the app that I'm developing allows people to do, well, I'm still working on it, but it allows people to do what they would be doing on paper. You know, oftentimes we'll go out and we'll collect cluster counts and weights, and from that get an estimate of the crop load on a per vine basis, and then based on the number of vines in a vineyard, extrapolate that out to get an estimate of what the total tonnage will be. But in the past, that's all been done on paper, which requires people to enter it by hand. Then that comes back into the office, and then someone else needs to transpose that into Excel. And then someone else then needs to crunch those numbers. And what I'm trying to do is create a completely digital data stream from the field to the database, and then be able to provide in real time as accurate as possible numbers as I can to our grower relations team, our winemaking team, and our finance and accounting team. Sorry, that was a mouthful. But.
No, that's great. And do you have like a team of folks that help you with all that work, or is that app design stuff all you and data collecting all you?
So I'm the GIS person, but in our vineyard department, we have, let's see, 5 different viticulturalists throughout the state. We also have a number of vineyard scouts and vineyard managers, and then vineyard directors. And so all of those people are helping me to collect that information. And then the vineyard directors, once I aggregate and average that data, the vineyard directors are the ones that are reviewing that data to share that with other people within the company.
Oh, great. So it's like a team effort. Oh.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I'm a GIS geek. One of the challenges I have is basically democratizing this software and technology and making it as accessible as possible to others within the organization that don't have my background in GIS, but do have the background in vineyard management and viticultural data collection.
That's great. Well, Dana actually had a question. If you want to go ahead, Dana.
I do, Deb. How many people are in your position? I know you've said kind of at your place of business that they're, you know, you're kind of kind of the guy when it comes to this, but is this kind of an up and coming profession across agriculture? And what other areas is this used in? I'm thinking towards, you know, our high school students who are kind of exploring careers. Is this something, you know, that they can use? Obviously it is, but what type of education would they look to pursue? Is there certain degrees that would benefit them? I know you mentioned getting your master's in geography, and kind of how would they go about exploring this more if they were interested in that?
So to answer the first part of your question, GIS within ag, I think, is still up and coming, and this has been a challenge for me, especially when I was a consultant. You know, you go and you talk to a farmer and you say, hey, I can map your vineyard for you and you can have all this information available to you. And they say, well, yeah, I know what I planted and I know when I planted it. What do I need that for? And for many in ag, it's a threadbare existence. It's any additional cost that you haven't already incorporated into your overhead is considerable. And so that's, I think, been challenging for GIS practitioners such as myself in ag. And maybe because the wine industry tends to be a little more lucrative than some other ag operations or sectors, there's been a greater adherence or incorporation, if you will, of GIS into the business. Certainly, working for a large winery affords me that in a way that a smaller vineyard management company just, again, could not justify. That being said, just based on my conversations with Crystal and other people I know in the greater ag community in California, more and more people are using GIS and or are aware of what it can do for them and their organization. To answer your second question, GIS is huge. I mean, the number of people using it in ag is a very, very, very small subset of the total number of practitioners. GIS is used by your city government, your county government, state government, federal government. It's used in real estate development. It's used in epidemiology. It's used in all sorts of different sectors, you know, timber. The list goes on and on. In terms of pursuing GIS, most people I know that have an educational background in GIS got turned on to it through a degree in environmental science or environmental studies. And that's often a great way to approach it because, and this pertains directly to today, right, being Earth Day, that so much information is out there that pertains to the health of the environment that is spatial in nature and can be cataloged in a map-based format. And so I know people that have been exposed to GIS through environmental science, but then also geography, and having a degree in anthropology. Says my connection is unstable. Again, there's a lot of different ways you can introduce yourself to GIS, but for me, I started by taking a GIS class at the Santa Rosa Junior College after I'd already obtained an undergrad degree. So there's a lot of different ways that you can find your way or find access to GIS, and the possibilities are endless in terms of a career.
Great, thank you. And I wanted to see if anybody else has any questions to ask Doug.
So yeah, I do. How do you see the COVID-19 issue and your kind of what you've already planted and gosh, how do I ask this question? Just kind of how does your plantings now?
How are they affected, maybe?
Yeah, kind of affected of this COVID-19? Is it something that, you know, other farmers are having to disc in their profits, or do you see any issues, or are you, you know, how's that working?
Yeah, well, I'm mindful of the fact that the audience are not yet of drinking age,
Right?
but we've seen a huge uptick in wine consumption as a result of or correlated with the COVID-19 pandemic. For us, wine again is an interesting agricultural product because it has a longer shelf life than most other ag products. And so it's not perishable. And so we're continuing to grow grapes. I mean, the grapes, they're growing, and the wine needs to be made. And we are doing our best to mandate social distancing within our field crews, in our wineries, in our production facilities. One of the challenges, obviously, is that we've got, you know, I'm not mandated to work from home, but it's safer for me and my family to do so. But I still am required to be out in the vineyard on a pretty regular basis. So that's with some of our vineyard directors and managers out in Galt, well, northeast of Galt, to discuss the redevelopment of a vineyard. And, you know, we're all hanging out together, but all, you know, 6 to 12 feet from each other. So I don't know if that adequately answers your question, Katie, but it's certainly impacting us. It's impacting everyone. But I feel very, again, very lucky to work for such an awesome company. We really, as a company, promote safety amongst our employees. We want everyone to go home safe at the end of the day. And so part of that is, again, taking into account some of the measures that I already mentioned, social distancing, and then if people are sick, then we're quarantining them, and we're making sure that they are being paid, not losing pay, and letting them know that, you know, and actually in a case last week, I was out at one of our vineyards and I ran into a vineyard manager, and I asked him how one of his employees was doing who had come down with coronavirus, and he said, he's doing good. We all pooled money together. Even though he's getting paid, we pooled extra money together, and we said, stay home, get better. There's work for you when you're better. And so I feel very privileged to work with a company where people care about each other, and that's really critical. So
I love that story, actually. That's really great to hear. And just like you said, we're gonna get through this together. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our 30 minutes. If anybody has a final question, otherwise I'd like to say thank you so much, Doug, for taking the time to be on with us and sharing a little bit more about what you're doing with GIS mapping and how important it is for ag and really for as an up-and-coming technology in general. I think you may have frozen. Can you hear us? But nonetheless, we will go ahead and leave it here. Thank you so much, everyone, and you have a great day.
Happy Earth Day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.